Well, Sharon's story is not unique. I've been speaking to a woman who believes domestic abuse was a factor in her sister's suicide. She says a coroner has asked police to reopen an investigation into her sister's death, but nobody has been charged with any offence. To protect her anonymity, we've had her words voiced by an actor.
He'd convinced her that none of us loved her. The kids didn't love her anymore, and their life was basically just him and her.
Can you talk about that assault in the October? Because was that the first real sign for you that things had taken a dreadful turn for your sister? Because you had an inkling, you could see the coercive control in action, but as with so many domestic violence victims, the majority of it remains behind closed doors, and even those closest to them don't get to see the full extent of it. So perhaps you can tell us what happened in that October that changed everything.
They started having an argument, and that's when he assaulted her. Threw her out of the house, smashed her head off the floor. When I spoke to her in the hospital, she was obviously devastated that it got to that point and got that bad. And I think she was more shocked at the extent that he'd gone to, especially in front of the children. And he actually got arrested. And I think he was held overnight. And then he got no further action. No matter how much I screamed to the police and then the hospital and the social workers, nobody wanted to listen. And I told them all that she would be dead by the end of the year. And I was 7 days out.
Can you take us through what happened in the new year?
I heard from her on Christmas Day. And I hadn't heard from her for a while up until then. And then New Year's Eve, she sent me the most beautiful voice note. Just explaining how sorry she was and how the new year was going to be her year. And if things get tough, it doesn't matter. She's going to be able to fix it because we're going to do it together. And she sounded really positive. And she reached out to the social workers as well, saying she wanted me to work with them. And, you know, she was. They said that the email was very positive. And then on the 7th of January, I got a call to say there was an incident at her house. So I rang one of her friends and got the friend to take the phone to the police on the scene. So I said, obviously, if he's there, this is because of him. You can't let him leave. Like, if she's dead, whatever's happened, it's going to have been down to him. And I kind of thought it was just going to be like a really bad assault or something like that. So I kept asking, you know, is she dead? Is she dead? They wouldn't tell me. And then they asked for my address, said that they'd send officers to see me. And then...
It's okay.
From then on, I knew she was dead because you don't send officers to somebody's house. And then the police turned up. All they could tell me was that she was found dead. And then we wasn't even left with, like, a port of call, like who to call, where or when to find out information. Like, where do I go from here?
Because to the police, this was not a crime being committed. This was a suicide. But in your mind, what was it?
It was a crime, straight away. I knew he'd had to have pushed her to do that. And the more I've learnt from her children, you know, that was something he used to say to her regularly. You know, why don't you just do us all a favour and just go and kill yourself and stop crying for attention?
And this is all coming from her children. This is what her 4 children were able to tell you afterwards.
Yeah. I feel like I failed her and her kids because it was so evident. You kind of ask so many questions to just not even really, like, get answers, you know? To, you know, did she have bruises on her body? You know, it was that, you know. Just no one wants to tell you anything. It's almost like it's a suicide, it's fine. Let's just leave it at that and not investigate things that are so obvious to anybody. I've explained it to them like friends, family, colleagues. They've all just been like, what? He's still walking around?
Still walking around and carrying on to the point where your sister's children still see him?
Yeah, they have run into him.
What do you want to happen now?
I'd like to see him be prosecuted. I'd like to fulfill the promise I made to my sister and her kids and see him in prison.